You're listening to the OK Dad podcast.
Please leave your message for
Daddy.
OK Dad podcast. Let's start this thing.
Can you not put that on YouTube?
You're listening to my husband talk a lot.
What's going on, Evan?
All right, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Hanging in there, dude.
Yeah, I hear that, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Have a moment. This is basically just a podcast that started up out of nowhere. I know there's a lot of stuff that people started doing in the pandemic. This is something that is probably close to my heart. I wanted to get more and more one-on-one time with people that we generally wouldn't talk to at the beginning, or like people that you would talk to and kind of get the insight, or kind of like campfire themed conversations. I know nothing about you too, so this is the first time we're ever meeting. But just to get a little background on you, how many kids do you have? Are you married?
One, not married.
Yeah. And where'd you grow up at?
Houston, Texas.
Houston? Okay. How long ago did you leave Houston?
2005.
Oh
Joined the
man.
Army. You're airborne. I see your maroon.
Yeah.
I'm airborne. You can see my posters.
Oh, nice, man.
And then, I did 10 years in the military, 11, 12, technically, if you count the reserve. And then got out, went to Connecticut to finish my degree that I was doing the tuition assistance for.
Right.
Found out my son's mother was pregnant, and we were like, we're not staying here. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
So we left before, and by the time that I was going to graduate, we were going to have like a month old, and he was going to be a month old, and we were like, we're not moving with a brand new baby, so we're going to go now. So we left, and we tried to go back to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and that ended up not working out. So then we moved in, and we went to Tennessee for free babysitting because that's where my parents were living.
Okay.
Moved in with them for a little bit, and then I got myself into like a marketing job. Enjoyed it quite a bit. And then we split, was dealing with things. And then.
Were y'all married at that time, or?
No, we never got married.
Okay.
I've never been married. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. She's screaming at me from upstairs. So long story long, ended up in a situation where she married a soldier who was based at Campbell, and then they moved to Fort Bliss, and it was just too far away. And I was just like, I got to get closer, but I'm not moving to El Paso because there's nothing for me in my field in El Paso. So I decided to move to Austin because I'm a software developer now. So, and that's a huge, huge field out there. So I moved to Austin, and then whatever happened, and now she's here and we're co-parenting.
Okay.
So it's an interesting situation.
Not in the like same household or anything?
Yeah, no, we're in the same household.
Okay.
It's basically a modern day sitcom.
Okay.
We're not together, but we're co-parenting our kid, and we're doing our own thing, but we come together for our son.
Yeah. Was that difficult to kind of do, or did it kind of come with ease because y'all both have your son in mind?
I think it's part of the latter, really. And then also we used to live together. You know what I mean? Like not a lot's changed in terms of, like preferences and things like that. And then it's just a matter, the only difference is that we don't see each other naked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To be honest. So it's literally just respecting each other's privacy. And like I said, we both work from home now. So we can basically pass the baton when it comes to like homeschooling and things like that.
Yeah. And so that's another cool thing I think too is how long have y'all been homeschooling for?
She was homeschooling him since before she left Fort Campbell.
Okay.
So about a good year and a half previously. And then I only recently became a work from home software developer. So then it kind of turned into where when she got into her situation with her husband, and I was like, you just move in with me. So then that way I don't have to worry about one, paying you child support while you're here, because that's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And two, I lost my train of thought. So then that way you don't have to we don't have to worry about commuting and all this other stuff, right? Like
Right.
what we've been doing for the last couple of years. So that way he's here and I get to see him every day, because I moved here after I talked to my bosses in Tennessee. I still work for the company in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the silver lining of this pandemic, is the fact that it proved the concept that I could work from home.
Oh yeah.
And they were like, we can't lose you because you know a lot of our company inside and out.
You're like super vital.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it ended up, being unfortunate. 600,000 people have died, but at the same time, there's a silver lining with everything. We know that as soldiers, previous soldiers. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, what ended up happening is that she moved in, and so then I got to see him every day, and then she needed to get a job. She wasn't working. I think in the military we call that a dependa.
Dependopotamus.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but she ended up getting a job. She was going to work every single day. And then, so she was paying for her bills. I'm paying for my bills. I'm not collecting child support. That's basically her rent to stay there. That was the situation. And everything's been more or less copacetic. Like I said, it was just a matter of mutual respect and letting sleeping dogs lie from the past and respecting each other's privacy, and then coming together for him. And we've always come together about our son. Like, I don't think there's very rare times that we've ever disagreed, even when we were apart. While we were together, even before we had a child, one of the things we discussed was always homeschooling. Like, we always wanted to homeschool, even before we had Jack. So, by the way, my son's name is Jack. He's 6 years old. Well, he's 5. He'll be 6 in November, but
that's exactly how I am with my son. I'm like, he's 4 until he's 5.5, and then I'm like, he's 5. He's 5, I think.
Right. He thinks he's 36. But,
yeah.
We have to remind him every day. But anyway, yeah. So we just came together, and so that's been the good thing, I think, is because we're in such agreement with how to raise our kid, and then everything else is us. Like, that's I do my business, black metal. I work for the company in Tennessee and do software development. I do my little knickknacks here and there. And then that's the other thing, is that we just come together and say, hey, first come, first serve on calendar. So if you want to go out and do something, we let each other know, put it on calendar. Unless it's a vital thing that needs, then I'm shit out of luck, or she's shit out of luck. Like a doctor's appointment and I can't make it because I have a meeting or something like that. And she has to drop whatever thing that she's doing. So mutual respect is a big, and I think that happens with any relationship. You know what I mean? That's
right.
It's communication and mutual respect. And even when you're in a relationship, I know that you've got to have your privacy. Like, you've got to have your man cave. Women have to have their she sheds and stuff like that. So that's pretty much what it is, I guess.
That's pretty interesting, because I think, well, with what I've seen just in general social media, people that I know and people that I see around, is that there's not a lot of that like willingness to, you see it so rarely, I think, right? The two people are saying like, hey, let's come together, let's hammer this out for the child. Like, we both want the same things. We're just not compatible in a romantic relationship here. And it really is rare to like see that making it work, especially in like the situation that you kind of defined out there. Is that coming mutually from both of y'all, like organically, or do y'all have like y'all's parents' relationships? Is it something similar like that, or are you seeing it? Do you think it stems from not having like a parent relationship that kind of has y'all, hey, like, this is what we need to do because we know the repercussions if we don't do it?
Little column A, little column B. I grew up with my parents. She didn't. I'm not going to get too much into her life, because that's her story to tell. But she was raised by her grandparents. So she did have those issues more or less with abandonment and or kind of that whole deal. And I think, like I say, it's column A, column B. I was raised with my parents. I know that feeling of just putting your all in. I mean, I only have 2 idols in this world. It's my dad and Robin Williams.
Yeah.
that's all I had in this world, and my mother, and there's several other women there, of course, but in terms of like how to be a good man,
Mm-hmm.
how to be a good person in this world comes from everybody in general, but how to be a good man in this world comes from my father. And
Right.
how to be a great comedian comes from Robin Williams, but also how to be a great person comes from Robin Williams because he was an amazing guy. And for her case, I think it's the same thing where she's always told me that the buck stops with her. You know what I mean? This whole shamming and abusive kind of syntax stops.
Mm-hmm.
And she never wants our son to feel that the way that she felt growing up. That's what she said.
Right.
That's her words. So I don't feel bad in saying that. Like she's legitimately told me, like, I never want him to feel like he's not loved. And I'm one of those dads who's not afraid to tell him that I love him, to let him know that I love him, because I think it's important. I'm not worried about this whole, oh, we have to be tough and we can't hug in front of, people and shit like that. Like, it's absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
There's no, the true strength is being able to stand up against those stereotypes. You know what I mean?
Right.
Against those silly little fears. I grew up in a theater family, so half of my uncles are gay. Sometimes you'll hear me hiss a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, because that's just, I don't have any shame in any of that stuff. Like it's kind of superficial to me.
Yeah. I think theater, I think that's a good thing to hit on too, because I don't remember, I was in theater arts growing up and being like 5'9", 5'10", like going into high school. I remember signing up for our, all my classes, and it was back when you did everything on paper, right? So we're going around the lunch area there, signing it. And the people having you sign up are like coaches and teachers and stuff. And every single coach was like, hey, like, you want to join the basketball team, or you want to join, the football team, baseball? And I'm like, no, I'm okay. Like, I'm good. I'm in theater arts. And what was really cool is my middle school teacher for theater arts, she went and got a position in the high school for the theater arts. So like I had the same teacher for like 7 years growing up, and like me and my buddies that I hung out with were in theater arts. And not that we didn't like playing like baseball or football and stuff, but we like doing that at the park. Like the super competitive nature that's in sports. I'm super competitive, but I've never been competitive to the point to where, the way you see people in sports and the way parents are reacting. I was in like T-ball when I was 6-7 years old, and the parents were more frustrated at like the children that were playing if a play didn't happen. And you could see the look of frustration. You can see them shouting at the kids with like anger, not with like, hey, let's have fun.
We're here to have fun. No, we're not.
Yeah,
we're here to win.
none of that. And so I think early on, like even hearing my father talk about it, like we would be on the ride home, like, whoa, well, why is this effing lady like yelling? It's just a game. And, the kids aren't even having fun at this point. And I get the whole, like, not everybody, this is before like the everybody gets a trophy kind of mentality. And I understand like, hey, it's competitive, but at the same time, like this is the first time a lot of these kids are like learning the game. And so early on, that kind of like sports just kind of drove me away from it. We'd play at the park and stuff, but theater was, I'll talk about theater all day. Like I started pushing my daughter into theater over like band, because my wife was in band in like middle school and high school. And I'm like, no, you'll learn so much more skills in theater. Like you have the teamwork that's there. It's a lot of physical stuff, because like in high school, you're moving sets around like in less than a minute for music queuing up and down. And I think that's it gets like a weird vibe to it for guys that are in theater too, especially in high school. Like everybody's like, oh man, you're gay and you're being made fun of. Yeah. And then you're just like, no, I'm just a regular person, man, just like you. And, I think when people start maturing too in high school around the junior, senior role, you're kind of falling into your identity there. And I mean, growing up, I was in a lot of theater plays. There was even a play where we had to dress up. Our teacher thought it would be funny if the guys were the background dancers, but the background dancers, were wearing heels and makeup and all this like. And so I remember doing that, and my dad had pulled me aside. And he's like, you don't think you're going to be embarrassed like later on in life when this comes up? And I was like, when would this come up later on in life? And he's like, well, like an employer or something. I'm like, no. And he's like, well, if you ever run for president, you don't think this picture is going to get out? And I'm like, if I run for president, like we're probably going to have a lot like better stuff going on if I'm running for president. And then this is the worst thing they got. Okay. I was in a play. Like, it's stuff like that I think it shapes you, it molds you, even if you're getting teased and stuff. Like it just makes you harder, stronger person, and I think it shows you the kind of people that are out there too. Because when you face stuff like that as a child, especially if you don't have a good background to support you, like it can go one of two ways, very, very early on. Are you trying to have Jack in theater arts as he gets older?
If he wants to, man. Like I honestly, it's going to probably be the same way that I got into it. Was just both my parents my parents met in theater.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Chocolate Bayou Theater in Houston, which unfortunately doesn't exist. It actually didn't exist, I think, shortly after I was born. But so my dad's a techie, like he's the backstage guy.
Oh yeah.
All the sound stuff, he knows all the set stuff. He's a genius. He was actually tech director at Tomball College for a time or two. And my mom's theater arts. Like but both my parents can do both sides, and that's how I grew up. I grew up on both sides of the theater, where I worked backstage and I worked on stage, stage managing everything. Grew up in that environment, and if he gets exposed to, he's a ham too. He loves to perform. He loves, to us because he knows it's one of those things where he's still not over performance anxiety for people he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And so we don't force that on him. But if he wants to, he wants to. Like I would love it, absolutely, for sure. But if he doesn't want to, I'm not gonna pressure him into it. The way I was raised was if I asked and it was in the budget, then there was an opportunity. But there were stipulations. Like I wanted to learn how to play drums. So my parents were like, okay, cool, we're gonna pay for the lessons, but you have to practice every day. I didn't practice every day, so they stopped paying for the lessons. Yeah. And that's exactly how I want to raise him is listen, man, the sky's the limit. And that's one of the important, you bring up theater in high school and stuff like that. One of the unfortunate things that's happening, is that arts are being scraped, removed from schools because they don't have the budgets for it. And it's unfortunate because people don't realize where innovation comes from. The ideas for this thing, and all the things that go in it, all the apps and stuff, it comes from innovation. And you create innovation from stepping outside of the box of convention, stepping outside of this box of culture and peer pressure, and just letting yourself go and discover. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get stuck in these ruts and these boxes of this is how you're supposed to act in this situation. And this is what you're supposed to say in this situation. And that, we know this is military. You know what I mean? Because we're grained that way. But even before then, as a child, you're growing up in such a strict household, or even a household where you don't have any rules, you don't know what to do, and you're looking at everybody else for cues. But the problem is that you don't know what to decipher from, because when you're looking at outside and you're not actually being told directly what to do. Say somebody who's not parents aren't there, role models aren't there, so they're at school and they're learning things from their friends, or they're learning things from their environment, and they get so much input, and 9 times out of 10 they choose the wrong input because at that age we don't act right. None of us act right. They choose the cool guy or the cool person to go after and to emulate, and then that's all they know how to do. And so then they stick inside this box, and it can go a million different ways. And that's why the arts are so important. And that's why I love homeschooling, because of the fact that it's you're not expecting a child to walk a line for 8 hours a day, 5 hours a day. You know what I mean? We literally have maybe a 30-minute session a day of actual sort of structured school. For the most part, the entire day is school. Every time we get an opportunity when he's eating, hey, how many carrots do you have left? Okay, if you take 2 of those, if you eat 2 of those, how many do you have left? You know what I mean? There's math right there. You know what I mean? His books and stuff. He's He's 5 going on 6, and we do 4 or 5 vocabulary words a week.
Yeah.
And we do record that kind of stuff. Like we work on the vocabulary and then being able to read it, say it, and spell it. And so but that 30-minute session, that's really the most structure that we have. And even then, it's just sitting down, reading the book, and then I point at the words that I know he knows, so that way he can say them. We go through these short little stories, and then at the end, he writes out his vocabulary words we've got a big whiteboard that he just sits on. He literally sits on this whiteboard and uses this big marker and draws them all out. And then we'll go through maybe a Play-Doh session, and then we use technology, the tablet. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Osmo.
No, I don't think I have.
Osmo is this really cool set of apps where you can buy the starter kit, and it gives you like one set is these little blocks of different shapes, and so then you use these shapes to make letters.
Okay.
This cool little like Yeti looking dude that's running through going, hey, let's try and do an A. You know what I mean? And he absolutely loves it. And then they've got a pizza parlor thing, which helps with math and adding, like, I need this many pepperonis, or when we pie it out, this is how many pieces we have, starts into fractions kind of thing. I'm kind of specifically avoiding the fractions part. It's slightly, I think the age range on that one was suggested slightly above him.
Okay.
But we were like, why not? We'll try it. He loves math. He's actually picking up on this stuff pretty quickly. And yeah, so it's just kind of like and then we go out and we'll, we try to find out, we don't force it if we can't. If we can't make it happen, we can't make it happen. But we try not to force it, but every opportunity for us is a learning opportunity.
Yeah. And
that's the best way to learn.
I think you're right about that, because I don't really believe that all the parents that are paying for like daycare, like myself included in that, when my son goes to daycare and stuff, they're letting us know, like, hey, there's a curriculum. This is what we follow. We follow the school district's curriculum going through. But I think when you start like diving into it, you realize like, hey, like their curriculum, especially for, a child ages 0 to 6, 7, before they even like get in kindergarten and whatnot, they're not sitting down at a desk all day like hammering out math problems and science. Like, it's a very short span that they have to learn. Like, even when you start digging into the science behind it, like their attention span is not what an adult is. It's not what a teenager's is. It's not even what a preteen is. So the short time that they do have to learn and stuff, like, yeah, you got to take it when you can. Like you said with the carrots, how many carrots you got? Like stuff like that all day. Like, what color is that truck? Like, hey, I got a Jeep. We just bought a Jeep a month ago, and my son loves it, and he doesn't want to drive in anything else. And we started taking the windows off and stuff, and so he loves it. So now anytime he sees a Jeep, like, he's calling it out. And like, this is totally different from my daughter. My daughter is I met her, she's my stepdaughter. I met her when she was 6. But you can paint her room, and 2 weeks later she wouldn't even know that it was painted a different color. My son, he'll be like, hey, that's a yellow Jeep. Or he'll be like, hey, did y'all change something in here? Did y'all move like that glass somewhere else? Like instantly, like, he'll know very small differences. So I think when he was like 2.5, he was pointing out my wife's vehicle, and he's like, that's mom's car. And I'm like, that's not mom's car. And I'm like, well, that's her make and model, but that's not mom.
Right.
It was just, so we call him like our most observant child out of the
three. Pattern recognition.
Yeah,
man.
it's like anything, man.
Good thing to teach.
He's just on it. So
yeah,
small things like that too. Like, you can really be intentional with it. I know myself, like, I'll go overboard with my daughter, because that drives me crazy. I'm like, how did you not notice this? I think it's to the point now to where she's doing it on purpose. Like, she'll just walk by like something,
because she knows it pisses you off.
Yeah, she'll be like, oh no, like, I'm trying to get a good like laugh out of this guy. But yeah, she does like now. So now, like, I'll change something deliberately, and then like, see if she notices. If she doesn't notice it, I'll wait, because it'll be something like that's gonna affect her day. And then when she does, she's like, what happened to this? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I have no idea. So it's like going both ways. Like, now we're both trying to just like trick each other on little things like that.
I felt kind of the same way. I mean, my thing that I'm working on with my son now is situational awareness. I think that's something that
Oh
Like,
yeah.
thing that's ingrained in us that we realize how important it is. Because he'll just, and then like run into people. Like we're constantly, going to stores and home because we just bought this house. We just moved in to San Antonio, I think like last month.
Oh, okay.
And so we're constantly going to Home Depot and I can make this better. I can make this mine, kind of stuff. And so we're walking through stores and he's just, walks out. And so we have a rule that he's not allowed to leave the aisle without mommy or daddy because we're afraid that somebody's just going to come by and sideswipe him,
Yeah.
T-bone him. And this is like, and, part of that whole look left and right, he knows his left and right, which is awesome. And my advice to anybody who wants to teach your kid left and right, YouTube, just this is left, this is right. Tell me which way you want to go, up or down, left or right. They will pick it up so fast because it's YouTube. You know what I mean? Like especially when you're in the subject that they like, which he loves Roblox videos and train videos and all that stuff. All the stuff that all the other kids love. Blippy. Apparently he was in the Air Force or something like that. But anyway, so that's how we learned left and right because it was an incentive.
Yeah.
It taught him to be able to communicate with us when we're controlling the TV. But now, he's 6 going on 35. He's got his own TV in there and, he can YouTube it all he wants. But anyway, so we taught him look left, look right, look left again before you cross the street. It's the same thing when you're leaving the aisle. And so then trying to do other situational awareness techniques because we have 2 cats, one's a kitten, and that one is just, I don't know if you've ever had a kitten.
Yeah.
You have to like cover your face with a pillow at night, otherwise they will like chew on your lip randomly.
Yep.
It's weird. And so this kitten is just all over the place, just like batting at stuff. And so like I'm trying to teach Jack, you've got to watch where he is. You've got to pay attention because you'll either trip over him and fall down the stairs or whatever. So working on that because he's a bit of a space case. But
Yeah.
so on.
I remember my daughter, we had a cat that, gosh, I don't remember which cat it was. We had 2 cats at our old house. But we had a cat and I went up there and we were trying to teach her to sleep in her bed at night because she was having issues not sleeping in her bed in her room. And I went up there to check on her and the door was open, but the cat was in the room. But her laundry basket, like the generic white laundry basket, was on the cat upside down. And she had a pile of books holding the basket to force the cat to sleep with her while she sleeps.
Wow.
I had to wake her up. I'm like, you can't do this. You can't force him to sleep with you. Like, I guarantee you, like later on at night, he's gonna come in here and sleep with you because we're closing our door because that cat will go all up over your face. But yeah, like she got through it after that. But I'll never forget that. Like, she reminded me of that.
He doesn't lock the cat or anything like that, but he'll run out and like try and grab the kitten.
Oh
like,
yeah.
no, it's my Harvey. Like I'm hanging out with him, and then he throws him on the bed, and he'll climb up in the bed. By the time he gets in the bed, Harvey's gone. He's like, "Where are you going? We were gonna hang out. I thought we were friends." But
I thought we were going to bed together.
Yeah.
Man.
And he does that too. Can I have Harvey? And it's like, well, we'll try, but if he doesn't want to stay, I mean, you can't force him to stay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You gotta have his consent too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's a lesson right there.
Yeah, definitely. That's something we're trying to deal with too. Like at daycare, hitting's always a thing. Whether somebody's hitting him, he was with it. Like, I can't remember when we started letting him go to his grandmother's house once or twice a month on the weekends. And before that, like, he was having issues with people hitting him at school. And then it turned out to be like, now he's hitting other people. And I'm like, well, I can guarantee you he doesn't hit anybody in our house and nobody hits him. So like, it's something here. And man, so once we got over that, we're like, all right, cool. Like, the thing is, this is my first ever child that's from 0 to 6, right? So I've no kind of background on that. My daughter, I met her when she was 6, so 6 to preteen, like I have somewhat familiarity. But every child's different, right? So like him growing up, after that, I'm like, all right, cool. Like, well, let's see what's the next thing we're gonna work on. Then now we have to worry about the whole like, oh, like he's going up and hugging people. Then aren't wanting hugs yet, and we're like, oh, okay, like, yeah, that's same way, right? Like, I'm like, come here, let me give you a hug, and I'm always giving him a hug to just showed him bear hugs the other day, so now he's trying to give me a bear hug, stuff like
Legit.
that. So I'm like,
Legit.
man, never did I think that you're gonna be going back to school and trying to like bear hug other kids too. I'm like, gosh.
Yeah, you got to be careful, man, because whatever you do, I mean, my son's cussing now, so I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a paratrooper, so I cuss up a storm most of the time. And so then the other day he was playing something on his tablet, and we just hear, "Oh shit!" come out of his room, and we were like, "Well, it's in the right context. I
Yeah.
mean,
He's using
and
it
he's
right.
home most of the time, like, and I don't
Yeah.
want anybody who's watching this to freak out about, oh, he's home all the time, he's not getting socialized. Like, we literally just moved here. We're still unsure about, Delta variant. My son also has autism, which tends to give a lower kind of defense. What's the antibodies and things like that.
Mhm.
So, and he's too young to get the vaccine. So it's like we don't want to put him at risk if we don't have to.
Yeah. And that's
So,
where I think we see a lot of that too, right? Because I just saw what was it? I don't know if it was a meme. I think it was more like a TikTok or something, where they're dancing, doing that stuff. Well, it was like people say that kids who are homeschooled are weird. And then it's like, okay, yeah. Like, but I've met a ton of people at regular school that are just as weird. So it's like, yeah, I mean, you're gonna go out in the world and there's a bunch of weird people out there too. You're gonna have to interact and stuff. I feel like it's more natural interactions, because when you're my wife was talking about this because she's a big proponent of homeschooling, and like she does her research. She's very, very like research based on anything that she's looking up, and she's a nurse. So like as we're looking at it, she's like, no, we have my daughter in a improv class right now.
oh,
So
nice.
what it is it's not throughout school, the majority or all of it, aside from college, we're in a class with people who are within a year of our age. So we're only socializing with people that are exactly like the same size as us, the same kind of mental capabilities.
Yeah, exactly.
And in this improv class, they had like a dance night, a theme party. So it was a mystery murder.
Nice.
So everybody got their assigned roles, and then they get kind of like their persona. And then when you show up to the party, they give you tasks, and you have to go up to every person, complete all your tasks. And then throughout that, you're trying to figure out who the murderer is. You can interact with everybody there. But the people that are at this party and the improv classes are anywhere from the ages of, I'd say, like 7 to 18.
Wow.
So being there and something like that, seeing them interacting, that kind of brought back those theater arts memories that I had from when I was in high school. Because other than that, like, you're not interacting with anybody other than your same age, other than in class. So like going to performances, going to like UIL competitions and meeting, other people, because it's, within a 4-year range that plays, being made out of. And seeing her there with a bunch of other kids just with a wild range in age, and seeing them interacting, because you would think like, no, I don't, if my 8-year-old is going to be interacting with like some 17-year-olds, 12-year-olds, like it's probably going to go bad. And there was the smallest person there was probably like a 7-8-year-old little girl, and she was interacting just fine. And I laughed because my daughter, her vocabulary is not where it should be.
Mhm.
And so she's talking about something, and the little 7-year-old is like, that's not how you say that. And keep in mind, like, all these kids, they're all homeschooled. So it's an improv class, it's a theater arts community, it's a theater arts building. It's only for homeschooled kids.
Wow.
So it's not any other thing. Like, nobody else is allowed in it. You have to be homeschooled to get into it.
Okay.
So like she's in there, and I mean, you're seeing that, right? Because you're not getting, that all these kids are not getting the same like standard one size fits all education that we have all over the country. So I think that like is a testament to homeschooling. Like, homeschooling, you're gonna get out what you put into it.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
seeing that, I was like, man, this little girl, she's right. And so I'm just there chuckling. I'm like, she's right. And I'm like walking off.
I think you get more of a malleable ability when it comes to like social situations and just in general, because because now homeschooling isn't what it used to be. I think everybody's stuck on the old school homeschool where people were just, the kid was stuck at home and maybe had a 30 minutes to an hour or like legitimately structured kind of lesson for 3 hours a day from the stay-at-home mom, and that was it. But modern homeschooling is legitimately just kind of free flow, and we all have these little groups that we join, so that way, our kids get to hang out with other kids their age, or even, just in general, just to do different activities with other people, so they're not sitting with their parents all day like
Right.
they tend to do, or at least my son does. So, and like I said, we just moved here a month ago, and we're just kind of she's doing all the research, I'm doing all the research, we're looking at the groups. This is one of the things that showed up, and we're like, cool. And so now I'm learning about this, this theater arts thing.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, because I might want to get involved in that myself.
Yeah.
So screw my son.
That's
But
kind
yeah,
of that was like exactly how I felt. I got there and I was like, man, this is pretty awesome. And they're talking about budgets and stuff, and I was like, let me see if I can get my work into maybe giving you guys something to help with the production. So
yeah.
yeah, but I mean it's really cool when you think about it, because it's one thing that is for children, right? Like it's for the kids. Like we always talk about it like it's for the children, but like this is something specifically even more like it's for homeschool children who are, I think, without a doubt, like underviewed in society at all, because you don't think about it at all. And now I think there's a big jump on with everything going on, right? A big jump on like, hey, let's go ahead and do homeschooling now. One of the things that really pushed me for it is, if you ever listen to the podcast, I'm never on one side or the other of a topic, and I always bring it up. Like I think it drives my wife crazy because I'm always like, let's look at this point, and they have some things that are valid. Let's look at the other side. They have some things that are valid, but I'm never always like, all right, let's go all in this way, because I feel like once you do that, your mind's closed to any other options that can happen.
Yeah.
And we start talking about this, but homeschooling for me is, there's adults that are, teachers now, and the way that they're talking to children is what was upsetting me. Like you can have your ideas and stuff, but forcing it one way or the other, like if you're super liberal or you're super, conservative about it, like the way you're talking to children, to me is super bad, especially like you may have some really valid points, you may have some really valid facts, but the way like you're talking to a child, especially like if that parent isn't there, there's some parents that, they just don't care about it, which is fine. I'm first and foremost worried about my kids first, but seeing that and like hearing stories and what people are telling children, it's like, oh man, it's breaking my heart. So I was like, you know what? As my wife started doing more research, I'm like, yeah, I'm okay if you want to go down
So
this
you
route.
mean kind of like, say the history teacher is teaching history a particular way, and not like, like, let's get political about this with critical race theory, right? That's a big thing that's happening right now across the United States, specifically in Texas. I mean, they just passed a law that's going to prevent critical race theory from being taught in schools. And, if anybody's curious about my personal take on it, I think it's important to learn how racist America was to start, right? And teach the progression of less and less racism. Racism still exists because in my head, personally, as long as we continue to categorize people by race, as long as we continue to recognize race as a thing, racism will always exist. Whether it's positive, negative, or neutral, it's racism. So if you take it off of the job application, if you stop worrying about this person's black, white, whatever, and you just judge them on their aptitudes, then everything will be fine. But the problem is I understand this, the reason why they're on the job applications is simply because of the fact that people were getting shunned because of the color of their skin. And so they had to put it on there. And along with that, in conjunction, the federal government put in incentives for people to hire Latinx and African Americans and people, and minorities in general.
Yeah.
Hire more minorities, and then they get a tax break and all this other stuff. because of the fact that they weren't being hired because statistically speaking, or these crazy ideas that people have in their head about, white race being better and blah, 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 which is absolute nonsense. You know what I mean? We've proven that. It's education, it's knowledge, it's access to that knowledge that causes you to be who you are. And then that acceptance of that knowledge, acceptance and knowing what's right from wrong. I mean, I'm sure you've had leaders while you were in the military that did some really dumb shit. And you're like, okay, well, I'm never going to do that as a leader. Being able to discern that, to understand that, okay, that is something I'm not going to do. I understand that you are my leader. You are a big influence on me, but the fact that you just did that and being able to tell yourself that I'm not going to do what he just did when I get in that position or I'm in that same situation, that's a completely different thing.
Yep.
Completely different thing. So yeah. So if what you're talking about is like that whole thing, I think that was the big thing that pushed me into homeschooling in general when we were talking about it long before Jack was even a glint in this world.
Yeah.
It always ends up being some kind of appeal. And that's how I grew up learning as well in public school myself, was I was always getting my teacher's opinion on things. I think at first grade and second grade, I had the same teacher, Mrs. Wyant, God rest her soul. She was actually teacher of the year, national teacher of the year.
Oh, wow.
When I was in first grade. That was the most eclectic, and for some reason I still remember this. First grade. It was the most, first grade and second grade were the most eclectic years of school that I ever had. Because we had people coming in from, we had Harry Antonopoulos, was one of my pupils or whatever, one of my peers. He had his parents come in and they actually did a lesson on Greek weddings. You know what I mean? And then we had the Jewish students or whatever, they taught us about Hanukkah and all their different holidays, not even just Hanukkah, but Passover and all these different holidays. And we learned about Kwanzaa. We learned all of these different cultures. Okay. It was really good because and taught by the people of that culture. Right. This was all through my first and second grade. I never had that anywhere else. Never had it throughout my entire schooling. Man. And then of course, here in Texas, you take Texas history in middle school and in high school, like every single year. And you just learn. It's like, how many times can we learn that we lose at the Alamo? You know what I mean? That's one thing that I appreciate, though, is the fact that we learn that we lose. But at the same time, our history books, the same thing with Vietnam, our history books tend to frame our losing as a win. So somehow they frame the Alamo as a win, and they frame Vietnam as a win. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be in the book, but they always say that the winners of wars write the history or whatever, but it's just so I feel you on that. And that was one of the things that drove me to agreeing with homeschooling and stuff like that, is because I'm an open-minded person. Most people would say that, I've got some Republican side of me, I've got some Democrat side of me, and people ask me, who are you, Democrat or Republican? I'm just confused at the end of the day, but if I fall into a category, it's going to be a libertarian.
There's a, oh man, I forgot what it is that somebody's trying to coin it. I think it's even a podcast name. It's called I'm Politically Homeless. And I was like, hey man, like that sounds like where
I like it. I like it. I feel that. I totally feel that. And I don't think I've ever felt at home with any party or the other. Like, I can agree with some things that one party does. I can agree, that each party does. But at the end of the day, what they're doing, what both parties are doing now is just completely ludicrous.
I think a big thing on that too, Evan, is like there's this book. It's called How to Have the Impossible Conversation. And it covers topics like abortion, women's rights, human rights, things like that, right? It talks about, though it uses those as examples. But when I read that book, one of the biggest takeaways I read that book because I wanted to communicate better with my management team. People above me. So I was like, I need to step in the right direction. Like, is it something that I'm not doing? And so when I was looking for a good book to read, that was one that I came upon. And it talks about people that are trying to have like two just absolutely colliding different ideas, and to sum it up, or how I sum it up, is it talks about, like, if somebody has an idea in their head and you're the opposite one, your immediate thing is like, hey, you're thinking this, you're thinking, A is correct. But if I just show you some facts that say immediately the opposite of your idea, like that's it, right? Because I'm showing you facts that it's immediately out. And what it does psychologically to people is when you show them facts saying the exact opposite of what, you know, their ideology is or their belief is, it makes them double down on their belief, because it makes them get defensive. So now they have to defend their belief. And it's not even whether it's right or wrong now. It's your belief. So it's just a matter of beliefs. It's not a matter of fact, no, of whoever or whatever idea it is, but now it's like an argument or a debate of beliefs.
I think it comes down to a subconscious of just, what have I've been believing this for this long? Like, I can't just let it go. Masters of denial is a phrase that I coined about it, is that you go so long about believing this or following a certain way somewhere, and then when it's pointed out, especially when it's done the way that the left does it to the right and the right does it to the left, you get into that mode where you're completely defensive, because you're just like, no. And then this whole term of alternative facts shows up and all this other stuff. One of the things that I do with, like, abortion, that's a big one, because the crux of that argument comes down to when life begins. Okay, and so heartbeat is decidedly, for the right, one of the stronger arguments, because, you know, and that's basically what Texas based their thing on, is when you can detect a heartbeat. You know what I mean? My whole thing is that I argue from their point of view, because that's the only way that it's going to work. It's not, they obviously believe what they believe. Yeah. Right? Not based on the facts I'm about to show them. You know what I mean? So that's not going to do anything. Those facts have been out there for a while. Like, it's not that at all. And I try to look at it from their perspective and go, okay, cool, I understand what you're saying. And for me personally, like, I believe in choice. Personally, for me, like, if she were to get pregnant again or whatever, or somebody were to get pregnant again, then it happens. I live with that decision. That's how I was raised. We did the thing. This is we're going to have this kid. That's how I feel. That's my personal choice. But I also believe that you have a freedom in your choice. So that's me. I'm pro-choice. I'm also pro-life. But if you want to have an abortion, you have an abortion. I'm not going to do it. So the argument that I have for everybody else is, why would you're building a brand new house, construction, ground up, okay? You just have the foundation laid. So you've got all the piping and everything laid up, and you've got just the foundation laid. Would you move in? Probably not. Yeah. The sticks aren't up, the walls aren't up. Why would God put a soul in an embryo? It's just the foundation. There's nothing there. There's that, you know, and for somebody like me who follows science, and that's kind of where my mind goes, is fact-based, research-based, you know, people who have PhDs who spent 10 years in school before they even did stuff. You know what I mean? That's where all my stuff comes from. So I look at it like, why would you move into a house where the foundation is just laid? You know what I mean? Yeah. And then, okay, well, I actually had an argument with somebody about this who was on that side of no abortion. And they were like, well, I'll just lay up a tent. And I'm like, yeah, but would you do that now? Like, in real life, you buy a house brand new and you're like, oh, I'm so excited to live here and I can't wait. So I'm just going to live in the tent the whole time. Like, you're in the way. So the house can't even be built properly because you're in the way. You know what I mean? Like, and besides that little case, I've rarely, and I don't win the argument. There's no winning of the arguments, especially when you talk about two completely opposite ideologies, okay? Because it's either abortion or no abortion, if we're talking about this specific case. You're never going to win. Yeah. And that's me, where I think the true meaning of America is the fact that we are allowed to make a choice. Yeah. That's it. When you take away my choice, when you take away my right to make a choice, you are un-American. Bottom line. That's what I fought for. That's what I defended. With the abortion, man, that's where I think, like, guys, we could talk about it up and down all day, but we're never going to be in that situation.
And
exactly.
also there's like bills and stuff that they've tried to pass because like, hey, can I start to get child support, when he's in there? I've heard like that argument, and like they've tried to pass bills.
Can I take out life insurance? If you're counting this as a life, why can't I take out life insurance? And then if I miscarry, then I can collect on the insurance.
And there's
not me, obviously, the mother.
And there's been bills that have like pushed up for child support to get like assistance for the life. And then they shot it down because then that would give it, if that happened, that would give it a definitive on paper, like that's when life begins, because now you are allowed to get child support. You are allowed to get life insurance. So since
that's proof of a capitalistic society right there. As soon as you give it a monetary value, as soon as you give the embryo a monetary value, it's officially a living. You know what I mean?
And that's why
you don't get a social security number until 6 weeks after you're born, though. You know what I mean? That's when you're officially considered a human in America.
That's where it goes back to like, hey, it's if you're picking one idea and that one idea falls on this side of the fence or that side of the fence, that's where all your ideas are. Yeah. And I don't know where you were at, but where I was at in my company, we call it the good idea fairy. And like where we're at right now is just a good idea fairy. Like we don't have, like, instead of the ideas that are great on this side or that side, like we can't pick them and bring them all together and say, hey, this is the best thing for everyone. Let's do this. And no, it's like, you can't say I like a little bit of that. I like a little bit of this. Like, let's mix that in there. I think that's one of the big reasons why I'm politically homeless.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about it the whole time. But my thing is like, if we can't, it's something so visceral as the abortion argument, I honestly think that, if we can't make a decision on it, then we shouldn't make a decision on it. It should be open rule. Roe versus Wade should stand just because we can't come to an accord. I think there should be time limits set on arguments. And you can revisit them because that's what the forefathers wanted. Yeah. That's the reason why we have amendments, and that we can rediscuss these amendments and we can make amendments to those amendments and things like that. I get it. But right now it's just like, just let it stand, just because of the fact that we're all it is just immovable, an unstoppable force hitting an immovable object. That's all it is when things come together. And it's just, and my thing is though, from a political standpoint, we're politically homeless because we don't quite agree with everything on this side. We don't quite agree with everything on this side. And the biggest thing that I don't agree with is the fact that both of those sides have actually come together to prevent the middle from being involved in any of their political, shows and circus, and i.e. debates and things like that happen during, presidential and mayoral and even governor stuff. Like it's really unfortunate because they knew that if you show any little bit of a gray area, people will flock to that gray area. It's statistically proven. People will flock to that gray area, and that's why it's like that. Is that they completely. The interesting thing is that if you look back in early 1700s, in the early years of this nation, 1780s, 90s, early 1800s, the Republicans were actually fighting for things substantially equal to what the Democrats are fighting for now.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the lines, the political parties and their views switch sides. People don't realize that. Mm-hmm. It's just really interesting. But the thing that's interesting though, that I don't know if you feel this with your veteran buddies or not, but like I can have a very serious discussion with some of these guys. Some of my buddies, most of my buddies are actually far right. They're Republican, they're Trumpers and things like that. And I've got friends of mine who are completely liberal, and they don't understand how I can be friends with them. It's the same thing with my Republican friends. They don't understand how I can be friends with, my liberal friends. And I'm just like, at the end of the day, there's going to be a zombie apocalypse, and I'm pretty sure I can count on both of you at the end of the day. And politics doesn't matter. And it goes back to when I was in Afghanistan. I wasn't thinking about, Senator John McCain, and I hope he signs, I hope he votes yay for that bill, while I'm in the middle of a firefight. Like, I really hope he does this. Like, that's not, oh man, freedom. Like, that's not what I was thinking about. at all.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the dude next to me and the dude on the other side, and they were thinking about the same things.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot. Like, it doesn't matter who's the mayor. It doesn't matter who's the president, who's the governor. If there's a piece of trash, on the side of the road in your community, it doesn't matter who's in office. That's not going to get picked up until you pick it up. Like, you got to be part of your community. You have to put in that effort.
Doesn't matter who dropped it either.
Yep.
Are you that person that returns the cart in the parking lot?
Yep.
We need more people like that.
Yep.
Just open responsibility, man.
I just went to the grocery store today, and I've noticed I park as close as I can to one of those stalls because I don't want to walk like halfway down the damn aisle just so I can put back the cart.
I've got a handicap parking placard, because I'm disabled or whatever, but sort of. So I just parked I never used to do that though, because I've got a truck. I'm in Texas, of course I have a truck. But I was one of those guys that would park, at the back of the parking lot because I've got a truck. So I just want to, I want to keep the sides open and everything like that. But I still return my cart. But I totally feel you on that because I started doing that too, like close parking. That's why I like HEB, because they actually have their cart returns all the way to the back of the parking lot.
Other one.
I think Walmart has like some religious rule where they can only have
they got 3 per parking lot.
They can't go 50 feet past the entrance in their parking lot with their cart returns.
Yeah. Well, as like we talk about this too, I think everything is so divisive. Like you can't get an ice cream without somebody getting on your tail. Did you get the
Why did you choose pistachio, huh?
Why are you eating almonds? You should be eating almond milk.
So you don't like vanilla? That's basically what you're saying. You
don't like cows?
You got something against vanilla? Like
too good for cows now.
Everybody's so triggered.
It's crazy, and I think this is where I think we're in uncharted territory when we look at this. But I wouldn't say I'm like terrified. I'm definitely not terrified, but like raising a kid in this kind of environment and like talking to them through the things is where, this is where it's so crazy to me because I'm having this talk with her, my daughter, like why people can't be rational, why people can't like look at facts, or why is somebody so wholeheartedly force somebody to be president when they've never met this dude in his life, or right. Why is somebody like fighting so hard or hate somebody so much that also they've never met in their whole lives. And granted, if it's for like human rights and stuff like that, like there's got to be a better way to like talk about it, especially to children. Because I'm all for ideas going. Like, let's hear your idea all day. Like, I'll sit down and talk about it. But if we're not there as parents, like, they're just hammering away any ideas, left or right. And it just, like you said, everybody gets so triggered now with things. Nobody wants to have to like sit down and have a conversation. Like, nope, these are the facts. This is what I saw. Here you go. And then that's it,
I think it's a children's book kind of thing to answer that whole query, that conundrum of how do I teach my kids this? I think, one, as parents, you've got to decide when's the right time, and you want to teach them before they actually get involved in that kind of situation. But at the end of the day, I don't know about you, but me, I didn't learn about something until I actually failed at it. Like I was one of those stupid Joes that went to the mall and bought a computer for $5,000 and put out an allotment for it, and I was still paying on it for like 6 years. Like I was one of those dumb soldiers, but I never did it again after I finally paid it off. But I think for me, it's one of those, like, there's a children's book for everything. And if there's not a children's book for it, that's your job as a parent to, it's your job as a parent to expand on that children's book. One, if you decide to use it. And two, to create the children's book if it doesn't exist and you feel the time is right. And so the best way to learn things without experiencing them that I've found is to relate it to something you already know. And that's why I always like, for example, we always use analogies, like the house analogy that I used. Mm-hmm. Or, why would you move into an unfinished house? Same thing. I use a house to describe what I do with a job for like web development. Like I build houses in the form of websites. That's what I do. So each page is a room inside of that house. Each little feature on that page is basically like a little knickknack, like a lamp or whatever. So that's how I taught myself how to do web design, to understand web design in general. And so that's, for me, that's kind of where my head's at, is like, he's way too young to even care. That's the other thing too, is like, they have to care about it, but also they could be way too young for you to even be, it's your job as a parent to worry about it. Absolutely. Never going to take that away, especially the mothers, like, worry about everything. Okay. And I will try and not be annoyed by it, but guaranteed that I will be. But knowing when the right time is, that's always a challenge. But if you did it, you did it, and don't be guilty about it. That's my whole thing. Like, if I taught my kid about the birds and the bees way too soon, then I taught him about the birds and the bees way too soon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just make sure he has condoms and hope for the best. But that's where I go. So like, I feel you on that, because I was thinking about that recently as well. It's like, the thing is that we're in such a volatile time. It's exciting for people like us who are adults, but it's scary because we have children. I'm like, this is really, really volatile. So I look at ways to, I always go back to the military. We learned how to mitigate risk. We knew that we couldn't prevent death. The job that we were in had an occupational hazard of death, and it was acceptable. You do that in any other civilian, you go into any other civilian job, death is not an acceptable occupational hazard. Military is the only place that's acceptable. But we have risk mitigation, and we have classes and training and death by PowerPoint on risk mitigation. And that's the best thing that I can use to determine when and how I should approach my son about discussing these things. And right now is not the right time, obviously, because he's 6 going on 35. But by the time that he's old enough, you know what I mean? But the other thing that I start to realize too is that this is getting really deep. The other thing that I start to realize is, when did I start to look at the political minefield that is politics and everything that decides, you know, what I can do and what I can't do? When did I start actually paying attention to that stuff? Because it certainly wasn't when I first went into the military. The only thing I was looking at was the paycheck. Hell yeah, I got a bonus. Shit, I get to be an adult. You know, I don't know if, funny story, I don't know about you, but like when I first got into the military, when I first got to my unit at Bragg, I got in trouble for something stupid. And I'm sitting there thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, God, I hope they don't call my parents. It was the first time that I didn't have like parental supervision.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that, no, I'm a fucking adult. I'm on my own now. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to call my parents. So that's the other thing that I start to realize too, is like, when did I actually start to care? Because when I was younger, I know that my parents were talking about, you know, the Reagan election, and then Bush Senior election, and then the Clinton election, all these, the midterms and things like that. I remember them discussing these things. My dad's typically a libertarian / Republican. My mother's predominantly Democratic. And I remember, you know, then having little arguments and things like that back and forth about stuff. But because I'm under their ward, I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. I've never actually been influenced by any of that stuff because I was under their ward the whole time. It wasn't until I got out of their ward, and then that first the Obama Kerry election. What was that? 08. That's when I actually started caring, because I'm in the military. This is the guy's picture that's on every single office.
Yeah.
I get to vote for that picture. You know what I mean? Like, I get to decide with it, you know, holy crap. So it was an interesting thing to be like, but then you're opening up this can of worms of what's a Democrat, what's a Republican, because I never really actually paid attention. They don't teach you that shit in school. They don't teach you actually how to balance your own checkbook in school, which is a huge problem. That's there's your benefit for homeschooling right there.
That's a big one. Yeah.
They don't teach that at all. You know what I mean? That's why I was that dumb soldier who, no offense to my parents, but you know, they gave me an allowance, but they didn't teach me how to spend it. They just said, hey, if you want it, you're going to save up for it. They didn't teach me how to like restrain myself.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Yeah, that's why I was that dumb soldier that went to go buy that stupid computer and put an allotment in on my paycheck for 6 years. So there's a benefit right there. But that's what made me start. I started to look back and go, I don't know when is the time to teach this. You know what I mean? Like high school probably. So you start to like trickle it in. I would think sometime around like freshman, junior year. I mean that generally, because obviously as you homeschool and your child matures, they're going to be on different levels than anybody else, for sure. I know
because even see, that's where it's like you're just placed in a bucket at that point, because everybody's going to have their different beliefs. So let's say you're pro-choice in high school. You're like, okay, I'm pro-choice. And then let's say, you have a family that owns a ton of firearms. You go to the range. So you're also like very pro Second Amendment. There's not a spot to like, hey, who do I vote for that does both of these things?
Libertarian. Georgia. Have you ever heard of her? Did anybody ever hear her? She was actually the only person with a doctorate that was on the ballot. And she plays hockey.
And even that, so nobody even wants to vote any other way because they're going to get like ridiculed.
They're voting.
Right?
Everybody votes for the lesser of two evils.
Through the whole political ordeals that go on, I have people that are super far left, people that are super far right on my social media, and follow all kind of like news sources that I can. And then I've only had one person that I think is a truly libertarian. And through the whole thing, calling out both sides on different things, which is like, yo, that's exactly what I think we need. And this is where I want to make sure, like my daughter, like, okay, like I go real deep into it. Like, hey, I want to make sure you're believing what you believe, not what somebody else is telling you or just showing you this. And then boom, you're all in. And like, I would go so deep into conversations on it. And then this is where, like you said, like, when is the right time for it? And then the very next question would be, okay, well, if you were a Pokemon, which Pokemon would you be? I think we lose that in the sight of everything. Like, these are just kids. You know what I mean? Like we go so deep into everything. And then the very next question is just, hey, nothing about anything that we just talked about.
Power Ranger. You know what I mean? Like, my thing, I think my thing for that though is, I think the biggest issue, it goes back to what you were talking about, how like I've been believing this for so long, and then you've presented me with new facts. People aren't malleable. People aren't flexible. They're afraid to change because they've been taught not to. They've been taught that if they show any kind of wavering in decision making in general, then it's a sign of weakness. And I think that's a big thing to teach kids from the get-go, is not to be afraid to change your mind. You know what I mean? Like, we were doing Taekwondo when we were in Austin, and it was really great for him because it got him into motor skills and things like that, which kids who have autism tend to struggle with, along with, like, he's really speech delayed. I mean, he only started talking like a year and a half ago, and so now he's a chatty Cathy. Yeah. But I still can't get enough of it because I haven't heard him speak for so long. Definitely, yeah. But anyway, so he was in Taekwondo. And there was a couple times where he was just like, no Taekwondo. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, we do this every Tuesday and Thursday. This is something that you said you liked and that you wanted to do. And we actually introduced him to it and said, hey, let's do Taekwondo. Let's see if he likes it. And so we did an introductory course, and he was like, I love it. Let's do it. And so we're like, cool, we'll pay for a couple of months and see what happens. And he ended up absolutely loving it. But there were a couple times but I put constraints, because I think that's something as a parent. I'm not just going to have a free range child. I don't believe in that. I think that's a little extreme. But allowing them to be able to change their mind. So letting him know that it's okay, that if you don't feel like doing Taekwondo today, that's cool. But you need to make sure that we're going to the next one. Okay. Yeah. So having some kind of constraint there, because it goes back to, I was a career counselor my last 4 years in the military. So yes, I was a professional liar. I was the one that was trying to keep you in and have you re-sign your contract. But my thing is that I never told people no. Anybody came in was just like, I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, cool. So your ASVAB scores are kind of low. So you might want to go take a course and then retake that ASVAB score, build that back up. Also, you're looking a little pudgy. They want you to have Superman strength and stuff like that. So you might want to actually want to work on the PT. Like I never told people no. And so all that to say, that's where I think it's kind of important it's okay to change your mind. You've received new information that contradicts what you originally had stored in there that made you on the track that you were on. You know what I mean? It's ice cream this way. Okay, cool. Yeah, I want ice cream. Sweet. All right, so ice cream, but you've got to cross this, rickety bridge. I'm afraid of heights. You know what I mean? So you've got this other path that you can take that doesn't go towards ice cream, but you can continue to ice cream. So now you've received new information about the ice cream that you want, but you're not entirely sure you want to do that.
Yep.
It's okay. There's other times to get ice cream. You know what I mean? Like it's not the end of the world. Nobody, and that's the other thing too that I've learned. This goes back to the military experience. Anytime something's a crisis or somebody considers it a crisis, am I getting shot at? No. Is somebody dying?
Yeah.
No. Somebody bleeding, life, limb, eyesight, that kind of thing. Like that's where I try to get my head. I don't try to keep my head there, obviously, but
I think especially with that, because there's been some pretty serious stuff, especially in my early career on the civilian side, where some pretty serious stuff has happened. And coming from the military, like we got a sense of humor. It's dark, but we got a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I'm in there, and I'm probably one of the most sarcastic people that anybody will ever meet. And like I just keep going with it because going through 12-mile rucks, 65 pounds, or doing like week-long FTXs with 4 hours of sleep, like it'll just keep coming. I'm the guy who we're doing ruck at 65 pounds, 2 miles in, I'm saying like, hey, we're halfway there.
Yeah.
Just completely like stonewall, like, yeah, we're halfway there. And then saying the same thing. And then on mile 11, like, oh, we took a wrong turn. That's me, like just saying these things, like ridiculous things the whole time. And so everybody knows that's my personality. And I come in the very next day after a very serious incident where nobody was dead, nobody got injured, but there was a lot of property that was damaged. And I come back and I'm same personality, right? And yeah, I got in trouble not because of the accident or the incident, but because of my attitude afterwards. And I'm like, well, one, I'm a leader in the building, so I want to make sure if people see you struggling as a leader,
your demeanor is important.
It's gonna just trickle down. Yeah. And like I'm not gonna change my personality. And at the end of the day, too, like honestly, nobody died, nobody was seriously injured. Like it's a good day in my book. And it wasn't seen that way. And I have to be like, I totally get it, because the people that were there, they've never been in a profession where that's, like you said, that's the hazard. Mm-hmm. So I think definitely like that's a big one. That's a big one. You know what I'm saying?
Being able to change your mind and just chill for real. Like understand that it's not the end of the world. It's hard. It's going to be harder to do, especially as your daughter gets older in the teenage ages. I know that.
Nobody wants to be wrong.
Yeah, nobody. That's the way people have been raised. Is that if you admit that you're wrong, then it shows weakness, and it's like no, it's actually shows strength.
Yeah.
Especially when you talk about the culture that we're in, that is like that penalizes you for changing your mind or admitting that you're wrong. You're actually stronger because you're willing to stand up to that stereotype and say, no, you guys are ridiculous. Like that's my thing, is just the biggest things that I try, and the foundations of everything that I try and teach or that I try to live my life by are pattern recognition and not being afraid to change my mind. Understanding that if I receive new information that contradicts what I've already learned, it's okay. You know what I mean? Yep. Fine, do some more research, back it up a little bit before I completely go gung-ho the other way. But at the end of the day, like, don't be afraid to accept it.
Yeah.
Because all you're going to do is hurt yourself and you're going to hurt everybody else around you.
I mean, it's all ideas at the end of the day, right? Like if you look at your beliefs and your ideas and what you believe, if you look at that like a set of clothes, you're not going to have the same set of ideas, same set of values that you had 5 years ago, 10
They
years
say
ago.
we're a different person every 7 years.
Yeah. I heard that about taste buds. So
I don't have any left. I don't know what you're talking about.
I eat super spicy stuff, so I don't think I have any left either.
We're in Texas. What else are you? What else is there to eat? I mean,
Mexican food and
peppers grow on trees here.
Well, Evan, as we kind of close this out, if you had all the other dads and moms listening, what would you say the final piece of advice you would kind of give to them if you just had all the attention for a moment? What do you think one piece of advice you would give to them would be?
We're going to do it anyway, but don't beat yourself up too bad. The thing that I really want to say is that if you're there, if you see your child, if you fight for your child, if you work with your child, if you teach your child, you're doing a good job. That's it. You're amazing. You're an amazing parent, because there are so many children out there. And even if they're not your child, even if you're a stepdad or a stepmom, or you're a mentor to somebody, you're doing an amazing job, because all kids need is love. That's all they need. That's it. And I know sometimes it's you have to speak their language of love. Sometimes they don't quite accept it, because I mean, it's always changing. You get a baby, and when they cry, it's because they're hungry. All right, cool. Give you some food, you pass out, you've got your little milk, your milk drunk, it's awesome, whatever. But then, as soon as you think you've got it, they change the script up on you. Don't quit. And as long as you don't quit, you're doing a great job.
Well said. Well said, man. Well, all right, Evan, I'll give you back your night, but I do appreciate having you on, buddy.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, man. We'll be in touch.
See you.
Don't mess with that. Just take it here.
Hello.
Oh.
Do it right. Do it right.
I don't know where you got all that from. I've never said that.
What are you listening to, Asher?